All right, it's time to get Marvel educated by new Rockstars. So they dropped a Moon Knight Episode 2 breakdown, Easter eggs, and details you missed. Thank you, new Rockstars, for allowing me to react to this. Very, very much appreciate it. Y'all, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications, and pretty please vote this up to let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. And while you're subscribing and upvoting, subscribe to new Rockstars as well. There's a link in the description below. You can click on that link, give the original video an upvote, and subscribe to them from there. I've been looking forward to this. As many of you might know, a lot of reviewers got early access to episodes 1 and 2 of Moon Knight. Some got more. I have actually been waiting for this for a couple of weeks now. Let's jump into this. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Moon Knight Episode 2, in which Moon Knight narrowly escapes a bunch of vegans by killing their dog. This episode was filled with Easter eggs, subtle cinematic details,
think of it like
even
that.
deeper layers of mystery.
I meant to scan that QR code. I completely forgot. Well, I'm sure Eric Voss is going to tell us what the QR code's all about, but I noticed that. I noticed it especially when I watched it at the screening at the Disney premiere. I'm like, oh my God, I should scan that, and I just completely forgot about doing that.
Let's break down this shot by shot for everything that you might have overlooked, and a reminder that the best way you can support us is to get our new limited edition Moon Knight inspired shirt. We're selling these off faster than we thought. It's called Tomb of the Moon God. It looks awesome, and when you get it, you'll unlock the added option to write in a custom shout out for our after shows, so get that at newrockstarsmerch.com. Okay, opening shot. Over sand, we hear the sounds of Moon Knight's beatdown on that Jackal that ended last episode. Here it echoes like a nightmare, but we are awake as we hear this because we're staring at the sand around his bed. And the fact that that sand is intact means that someone returned home after that fight and reset the sand. That someone being Marc, if it's now Steven awaking from it thinking it was a dream. So Marc is complicit in keeping Steven in this illusion that he's just sleepwalking. Last episode I pointed out how Steven's inaugural step in that sand compared with Harrow's first step on glass makes Steven more connected to the sands of Egypt, and this episode ends with Marc back in the desert. From sand we begin, and to sand we shall return. But Steven ain't ready to take those steps. He springs out of bed, slips on the sand, stumbles, landing on his face just like he landed in the Alps after Marc had been in control.
Oh,
it seems like
how
Steven
poetic.
is gonna repeatedly land on his face just like this. Also, his foot harness tightens so that now it's like he is being leashed to the bed. What was meant to be a harness for his sleepwalking alter ego is really confining himself. Now, among the stack of books in front of him is one titled Adventures of the Soul, Journeys Through the Physical and the Spiritual Dimensions. This is a real 2014 book by a medium named James Van Praagh about the human soul and how it fits into this life and how it travels into the spiritual realm. So really, Steven isn't totally unfamiliar with a soul's detachment from the physical body. Also, I didn't mention this last episode, but among Steven's textbooks are a book about Asgard, What's Old is New Again, and another one about Wakanda, which we should note worships the panther deity Bast, which is derived from the Egyptian feline deity of Bastet. Steven opens his—
I didn't catch that. I gotta say, that's a really nice detail on that book. I mean, the Wakanda book. What's cool about these books is they look lived in. These are details that are throwaway details most people won't ever catch, and yet it's all there, like very thought through. Maybe they just took an old book and then like put over, you know, a new text over the thing, over the bind. I really appreciate that because those are things that people spend a considerable amount of time on, and yet most of us won't ever catch it. It all helps to bring this universe to life. It's wild.
Steven opens his cabinet mirror to confront Marc.
You there? Didn't think so.
Now, it might just be the way the camera or the cabinet moves, but it does look like his reflection on the far right does turn his head a little, independently of how Steven turns his head. Then Steven steps up to London's National Gallery. While production was in Budapest, and last week the museum was a Budapest museum, this is actually London's Trafalgar Square. That's Nelson's column to the left with the lions. The double-decker bus that passes is an ad for Made Chandeliers, the Verona light, another Shakespeare reference to Romeo and Juliet in Fair Verona, where in the most famous scene, Romeo compares Juliet to the sun, his Verona light, and begs her to kill the envious moon. In this episode, this Romeo reunites with his Juliet and hopes to end his toxic moon entity. As he enters the museum, the camera tilts, following him until we are upside down, reminding us of my favorite shot last episode when we thought we were right side up looking at a puddle until a leaf proved that we were actually upside down. All of it showing how Steven's self-perception is actually illusory. In JB's security arena, several cameras are pointed at the sarcophagus that Steven showed the girl last episode, and beside that there is a QR code on the wall that actually links to a digital copy of Werewolf by Night.
Oh, that's cool.
Which was the first comic appearance of the Moon Knight character.
That is
that
cool.
Same QR code actually shows up this episode on the number 43 locker at
that
the
was my
storage
curiosity.
facility. Except now Marvel updated the link so that it takes you to Werewolf by Night number 33. So I'm guessing we're gonna see these QR codes in many episodes throughout the season, and they'll just update it with new issues each week.
That is super cool, Marvel. That is dope. That's super, super clever. I don't know why. That gave me a little bit of goosebumps. That you could scan your. What a time to be alive, man! What a time to be alive. You can point your phone at the TV of the thing you're watching, and it takes you to this other dimension of a thing you could. That's wild.
And I think I just put together that Steven's fish's name of Gus might be short for sarcophagus. They watched back the security footage, but there is no Jackal. It's just Steven reacting to nothing.
Right.
Now, Fight Club has been mentioned as an influence, and this seems like a nod to the scene in Fight Club where Edward Norton's character fights Tyler Durden, but later on security footage shows him hitting himself.
referenced that,
But if you look closely at this footage, as Steven runs past that column, there's some digital noise on the screen, and if you compare this to last episode, that was right when the Jackal hit that surface. So while the Jackal is invisible to everyone else, something caused that static. Steven says,
there was a dog chasing me like a hound.
Oh yeah, Hound of the Baskervilles was it?
Yes, referencing The Hound of the Baskervilles, the third of the 4 Sherlock Holmes novels written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, a mystery about a phantom dog plaguing an estate. It was actually really an inheritance scheme. Similar to the hound that chases Steven this episode, if you think about it, really boils down to an inheritance scheme. Arthur Harrow having issues with Khonshu for choosing Marc Spector as an avatar, and Marc Spector not wanting the beneficiary of these abilities to pass on to his wife. And the footage ends with Marc confidently stepping out and staring directly at the camera as if knowing Steven the next day would review this footage.
That, I wanted to point out, is a mild inconsistency because if you look at the footage of Marc in the reflection, his hair, I mean, I don't know if they're aiming for anything in particular, but his hair had like curls to it, like a very specific style to distinguish Marc from Steven. And then whoever's looking at the camera, which is obviously not Steven, like his hairstyle's wrong. I know that's just a dumb little thing to nitpick at, but I noticed it. Marvel's like so particular about all these little details. I'm like, how come they do?
That's not me.
The desk in the HR office again gives us a clean reflection of Steven. The HR manager offers therapy.
This particular group of doctors has a long-standing relationship with us.
But the fact that he doesn't get the police involved, but then some cops who do get involved, these detectives, end up being part of Harrow's cult, makes me wonder if this HR rep is also part of that cult as well.
That makes sense.
Because he says,
You're not alone.
You don't see his arms. He's got sweaters on. A sweater.
It's like
Got a sweater on.
yes, you're not alone, is as much a threat as Steven. We're always watching. For the greater good. The greater good. If you look at this brochure, it shows a woman holding hands with a doctor, which could be a nod to Harrow's Emmett assessment, which does evoke the Scientology auditing process. MT also pointed out on Inside Marvel that the pamphlet is also covered with the logo of a green crescent moon shape, which just could be a sign that even Khonshu and his possession could all be part of Steven's mental health delusions.
If you walk around Los Angeles, I mean, you don't see it as much anymore, but you used to see Scientologists in the streets, like ready to give you a test and whatnot. I forgot what it was called, where they have these like they have these meters to test a particular kind of energy in your body to determine whether or not you need Scientology.
Steven is forced to give up his name badge, a name that even JB never committed to memory, foreshadowing how this episode ends with Steven surrendering his Steven identity to his Marc Spector identity. His gold-painted friend Crawley, again his homeless friend from the comics, never moves a muscle until Steven hugs him and Crawley side-eyes him. Just a little example of something tricky happening just outside of Steven's perception. Now, in addition to the QR code detail, the locker number 43 could be a nod to Moon Knight number 43, in which Moon Knight faces Seth Falcon, a villain who drains a person's life, similar to the way Arthur Harrow does in the series. The walls of Marc's storage unit are reflective, but noticeably cloudier than the other reflective surfaces we've seen on the show. Maybe a safeguard put in place by Marc, so that when he was in this room, he wouldn't accidentally see Steven's eyes and accidentally surrender control back to him. Steven finds Marc's pistol and stacks of foreign currency. The red 100 notes are Chinese yuan, making me wonder what reason Marc might have needed to go to China or interact with Chinese buyers, maybe a deal with the 10 rings. Marc's American passport lists his birthday as March 9th, 1987. Oscar Isaac's real life birthday is March 9th, but the year 1979, because Hollywood subtracts 8 years for men, but then adds 16 for women. The issue date is December 14th, 2018, which means that Marc got his passport during the blip, which started in May 2018 of the MCU timeline, confirming that Marc was not dusted during those 5 years. Steven finds the golden scarab, which hovers over his palm.
I'd say you're a compass, but you're not pointing north.
Yeah, this compass would presumably point toward Egypt, which is southeast of the UK. Worth noting that this would also be the general compass heading for Mecca, which Muslims around the world pray in the direction of throughout the day. In this case, the scarab also points directly at Mark's reflection. Steven snaps at him.
Look, I don't care how bloody handsome you are. Tell me what it is you are.
Yeah, gotta love the meta joke for Oscar Isaac there. But for Steven, he sees handsomeness as a factor of confidence, something he doesn't have. Thus, he's unable to see his own good looks. Mark explains,
I serve Khonshu.
I wonder if that was an improvised line. It's not beyond the realm of possibilities. That is just, he just threw that in there as a joke. And they're like, you know what? We're gonna keep that because it's a ha-ha.
I'm his avatar, which means you are too, sort of. We protect the vulnerable and deliver Khonshu's justice to those who hurt them.
Mark pauses before using the word justice, as if intentionally drawing a comparison between Khonshu's justice after damage was done, between that and Amit's judgment before any sins were committed, a distinction that Steven later levies against Harrow. Steven looks at the gun.
Now give me the body. Let me finish this and you'll never hear from me again.
Yikes, Mark is in the reflective surface of the pistol too. Just very dark to imagine someone hearing these kinds of voices when pondering picking up a gun. Like Steven could be imagining one way to silence Mark forever. Now earlier when they walked up to this locker, the motion sensor lights overhead slammed on. Just setting up this awesome scare with Khonshu now, flashing in and out of the lights with louder and louder slams. So the lights alone represent the demon, like the barrels and jaws representing the shark. This also works like an inverse of David F. Sandberg's amazing Lights Out short, The Ghost in the Light, instead of The Ghost in the Dark. Steven gazes up at Khonshu's form as the lamp overhead glows brighter and brighter, and I just love how you can now see a big divot in the ridge of his beak, like he's been in some kind of battle in this ghostly form. And then you can see up into his skull orifices, a ribbed texture interior for our pleasure. Because the inside of a lot of skulls are rarely smooth or sanded down, just little details like this make him more lifelike.
Those details
Layla
are
pulls up
awesome.
to him, greeting him upside down, just like that shot of him entering the museum earlier. She says to him,
"You really could have given me any sign that you were alive."
I never
throughout this conversation,
thought about how many upside down shots are in this entire thing. He's pointing it out. I'm like, oh yeah, like there's a lot. You notice the big one when he's walking into the museum, but outside of that, for some reason, my brain isn't tallying it all up and going, there's a lot of shots upside down. It's like his life is upside down. You just sort of feel it. I suppose it's more of a subconscious thing for me as the viewer.
Through the mirror, the people he speaks to in mirror reflections are just difficult for him to trust as legitimate. In his flat, when Layla looks at Gus in the tank, Mark's reflection appears in the tank behind hers, despite Steven being back at the door, showing how Mark is now in a kind of sunken place, trapped in an Egyptian-themed tank like Gus is.
Way out of your depth.
Brother, you're literally in the depths. Now on the shelf are some visible titles. Joseph Pearl's Revealer of Secrets, which is considered the first modern Hebrew novel written in 1819, a satirical collection of letters among Hasidic rabbis. Marc Spector is Jewish, son of a rabbi, something this series will explore with the Jewish cultural consultant listed in the credits. Also, The Man in the Ice, which is a book about the 1991 discovery of a 5,000-year-old Neolithic corpse in the glacier in the Alps. It's actually not that far from the valley where Steven woke up last episode. And of course, Man in the Ice, we definitely had another one of those in the MCU. But the book Layla picks up is a collection from French poet Marceline Debordé Vamor, Les Fleurs, or The Flowers, from the year 1833. The two of them quote the opening verses from Les Séparés, or The Separated.
Marceline Debord Valmore.
Ne crie pas. Je suis triste et je voudrais m'éteindre. Le beau été sans toi.
C'est la nuit sans flambeau.
I was asking Achar, because she speaks a little French, what that means. I'm like, Achar, what does it mean? When she was like, shh, 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 shh. I don't know. Great. All that suspense for nothing.
Which translates to, do not write, I am sad. I would like to die out. The beautiful summers without you are the night without a torch. These words reflect the separation between these two lovers. Mark ghosted her, wanting to die out in Layla's mind, essentially telling her, don't contact me. But really without each other, they have been lost in the darkness. Earlier in this episode, we got the allusion to this Romeo's sun, making the moon envious. And here's another literary allusion, comparing this star-crossed lover to a flame in the night. And it's sweet that Layla's favorite poet was Steven's favorite poet, despite him having no other memory of her, and Mark even trying to block her out. Like MJ still wearing Peter Parker's broken necklace. Another example in the MCU of love persevering through memory. When Layla finds a scarab and confirms it does point to Amit's tomb, on the table beside Steven, a little gator or a croc statue, Amit ready to devour him. Then the detectives knock at the door.
DC Fitzgerald and DC Kennedy here.
Fitzgerald and Kennedy. Interesting names for detectives, because it's the middle name and the surname of the US President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, because these are probably fake names recognizable to an American, but less so to a Brit. Actor Anne Akajiran is credited as Bobby and David Ganley as Billy. When they bring in Steven and run Marc's records, his file number begins with 1975. That was the year Moon Knight first appeared in Marvel Comics. And the assigned agent is Nick Pepin, the real-life production manager on Moon Knight and several other Marvel titles. Love it when they work the crew names in there. The photo here shows at least 4 bodies shot in the heads at an archaeological dig site in Egypt, which seems like this is all being taken from Moon Knight comics, where Raoul Bushman murders Marlene's archaeologist father before Marc becomes Moon Knight, something that may be the case with Layla and her father. But uh-oh, the cops are drinking the Amit Kool-Aid based on their tattoos. There's a tattoo also on the kid with the soccer ball, and her tattoo seems to even move a bit as she's holding that ball. The soccer ball is unworthy. Oh, soccer ball, it's a shame you can't be here to see the world we create. Harrow greets him.
I think that was just her bones. Like her skin moving.
I'm sorry for the wait.
Yeah, they mixed in sounds of broken glass in his sandals on each of his steps.
You know
Khonshu
what?
begs
I didn't
Steven to
catch
kill
that.
Harrow, break his windpipe, but Steven ignores him, and Khonshu kicks the trash bin. Just a little thing setting up all the invisible forces smashing stuff in the climax of this episode. Harrow takes Steven on a tour of this cult commune and chats with Jamila in Mandarin.
Layla, Wakanida.
你还是个熟的。
Listingla, Jamela. Listingla.
Yeah, again, if you listen to his kick, there's a bit of broken glass mixed in there. As
caught
Khonshu
it that
watches
time.
from the roof, his crescent moon staff frames the streetlight above. There's no light of the moon yet, showing how Khonshu is still powerless at this point in the scene. Inside, Bob Dylan's Every Grain of Sand plays once more, just like it did in the opening scene of the series. There's some cult members watching serene nature footage, just classic Clockwork Orange style indoctrination there. Harrow recommends the lentil soup.
Victor's recipe.
Gracias, Victor.
He's from the Yucatan. It's very funny.
Victor. There is a Victor Mancha in the Marvel Comics, aka Victorious, cyborg son of Mexican mother Marianela Mancha, and Ultron Tech, who's part of the Runaways, ties in with the Age of Ultron storyline, later kills Vision's son Vin, but I don't know if this is the same Victor. I just love how Harrow feeds Steven these lentils that were grown in their community garden while using a gardening metaphor to describe Amit's judgment.
She tears evil up from the root, casting her judgment before any evil's done. That's why we must resurrect her.
Almost as if he's saying, you're enjoying our garden, trust the gardener. But Steven rightfully counters.
If Amit judges people pre-evil, like before the fact, then isn't she judging an innocent person? A thought can't be evil, can it? I think about killing my boss all the time, but I wouldn't actually do it. What about a child? Would she kill a child for something they might do in 30 years?
And Steven doesn't buy Harrow comparing kids to diseased limbs needing amputation, so Harrow has to whip out the big guns.
This is Amit's gift to her first avatar. It contains in it a tiny sliver of her power.
Yes, another reference to Amit's first avatar, who betrayed her, whom I have speculated could be Pharaoh Ramatut, aka Kang. I know it sounds like I'm reaching, just watch my video on that. I swear, I make a pretty good case for it. I like how throughout this, as the cult members back away in fear, that projected nature footage now shows a hummingbird flapping its wings and then mushrooms sprouting, mirroring the tension of the scene, the chaotic heartbeat of a hummingbird, then exploding into a mushroom cloud plume. Layla arrives with the scarab and they flee as Harrow uses the cane to open a purple crack in the ground through which another Jackal arises. Another example of glowing purple rifts through dimensions in the MCU after Spider-Man No Way Home. Perhaps the purple glow indicates the realm between universes, what Wong called the dark border between known and unknown realities. And it is from this realm where these hell beasts are summoned. Harrow chants, and on his staff, those crocodile eyes of Amit glow purple. The Jackal knocks Steven out the window. This is likely the moment he loses the scarab, considering his jacket billows up. But Steven hits a superhero landing dressed as a dapper Mr. Knight look, taken directly from Warren Ellis's 2014 comics, whereas Mr. Knight in the comics is really a clever criminologist detective, another main form of Khonshu. In this series, it's really just the form Stephen Grant takes when he tries to summon Khonshu. The suit is a finely tailored three-piece suit with a form-fitting mask with stitching down the center of the face, reflecting Steven's fractured identity. But I love his shoes, loafers with these white wrappings, just a little hint of that mummy linen aesthetic.
Apparently the wrappings is a new touch that the I think the director asked for, if I'm not mistaken. The person who designed Mr. Knight is named Declan Shalvey, and I met him at the Moon Knight premiere. Really, really, really nice guy. I was there when Coy introduced Declan to Mohammed Diab, one of the directors of the show. I believe it was Mohammed who said that it was actually his idea to add these wrappings to the shoes, because in the comics, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't read the comics, they're more just flat. And so he wanted to give it some kind of texture or design, and Declan was like, yeah, I love it, it's cool.
It's just a little hint of that mummy linen aesthetic. He and Mark argue.
She said I needed a suit. Yeah, the ceremonial armor from Khonshu's temple, not Psycho Colonel Sanders. Well, I don't know how any of this shit works.
Yeah, I just like how in response to that, the Mark reflection blinks his glowing eyes slowly in disappointment. Layla breaks the bottle over the Jackal's head so that she could see it with the fluid that's sticking to him, but then the Jackal lifts them both and slams them against the wall. As it does so, you can still see the last of those little droplets of fluid shaking off from the motion. Steven tries to lure it away.
Like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
He's quoting Muhammad Ali, not realizing that the second half of that line was, his hands can't hit what his eyes don't see. Ironic, since he is trying to fight something invisible to everyone else. Also worth noting that Mark in the comics had a past as a boxer. Steven instead says,
my name's Steven with a V.
Which is a fun nod to the fact that the MCU already has another Steven with a PH, Stephen Strange. And then after he hits the Jackal, he screams, "What? I did it!" Which is slang used in London that came from immigrants from Caribbean countries, basically meaning, "What's up?" or "What's going on?" The double-decker bus has an ad for the GRC, reuniting you with your better half. The GRC, of course, is a global repatriation council, the agency introduced in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier that resettles people after the blip. Also, ironically, in this moment, Steven is struggling to reconnect with his other half. Overhead, this bus is coded with WBN 0032, another nod to Werewolf by Night number 32, Moon Knight's first comic appearance, also apparently the one comics reference the series is allowed to have Easter eggs for. Steven has to surrender control, and Moon Knight's ceremonial suit takes over, and I love it. Beneath those mummy wrappings, gold armor slides out over his shoulders. This automated assembly, the stitching together of the suit is just so piecemeal and tactile. You can see each thread snaking and binding him. Just reminds me of the pieces of Iron Man's armor clinking together in that original 2008 film. Mark unsheathes his chest weapons, of which he seems to have an unlimited supply, like cards from a blackjack slot. Mark lures the Jackal up the building past the crescent moon, which now glimmers in the background. As we saw last episode, the crescent moon shines when Moon Knight has the upper hand. As he leaps from rooftop to rooftop in this thrilling montage, that crescent moon actually gets larger and larger in the frame, symbolizing his growing power. He runs down the Thames, reflected in the surface of the water, and it ends as he impales the Jackal on this outdoor altar and retracts his chest piece in the light of the crescent moon. The two shapes matching each other. Just gorgeous shot composition here, and showing how all of this power is coming from the moon. Little detail I spotted here, in that courtyard, there is a silhouette of someone watching in the shadows in the background. Might be an onlooker, might be a crew person who got left in frame, might be Khonshu. Steven tries to reclaim the body.
We've always managed to keep a wall between us, but something's changed. The one who controls the body's become stronger. The reflections help, but most of the time it'll take all your willpower just to be a fly on the wall.
Yes, so it sounds like, to answer Harrow's query from before, Mark might have already had dissociative identity disorder. Now Khonshu's possession is making whichever identity is in control at any moment stronger at keeping the other identities suppressed. Mark says,
We wouldn't be alive if it weren't for Khonshu. And my servitude is the price that I pay.
So yes, it sounds like they are adapting Marc Spector's origin from the comics, that Mark was dying when he came across Khonshu's tomb, and that's when he got possessed. But Steven, now bolder and angrier, as one of those suppressed voices really gets under Mark's skin.
Just shut up, stop it. Moment. Steven, shut up, I promise.
Yes, the church bell tolls for Mark's mental break like the bell of a boxing ring signaling the end of a round. Another nod to Mark's boxing history. Like the church is saying, hey, break it up, back to your corner. Now, odd detail here, if you count the bell chimes to try to figure out the hour, it rings at least 14, maybe 15 times, which is crazy because church bell towers never ring more than 12. So they may have doubled up, because as we cut in and out of Steven's reflection, they could have done that to show both identities hearing the first couple chimes. I love how Khonshu appears among the gargoyles of the roof, just blending in with the surroundings. And the shot does not break from Mark's perspective as we then look up to another rooftop where Khonshu is suddenly appearing there mid-sentence, and then the camera drifts right back down to Mark where Khonshu is right behind him. And I love how in the moonlight now, streaming through the tree, you can clearly see how this skull is actually floating over his body, but those errant hairs connected to his skull drape downward to make it seem like there is a connection, like a marionette head defying gravity. Love this transition here as Khonshu steps across frame, his wrappings dissolving into the falling curtain that Marc had draped over a broken mirror to hide his reflection. Since Marc is in a different spot of the room, the reflection is Steven, covered in a bedsheet on the bed, his knuckles bloody. This means that Steven must have tried to break out of the state violently and injured himself, now looking a lot like Merton.
I was gonna call this out. I actually whispered this to Achara at the screening. I'm like, this is just like Apocalypse Now. I'm sure it's a reference to Apocalypse Now. I'm sure Eric Voss is gonna call out that it's just like Apocalypse Now, and there it is.
Sheen after he cut his hands on the broken mirror in Apocalypse Now. And in that cracked mirror, you can see Steven is wearing the Star of David necklace, another nod to his Jewish heritage. Marc stumbles across the room, opening the curtains to reveal the pyramids of Giza of Egypt. And I just love that this whole sudden transition to Egypt took us here while we were in Marc's perspective, confirming that Khonshu backseats his avatar, whoever is at the wheel, Steven or Marc, and that this avatar, like us, is really just along for the ride. Now over the credits plays the Egyptian anthem El Malouk by Ahmed Saad, featuring Inaba and Double Zooksh. Awesome Egyptian jammer to end this episode. And the final shot of the credits actually changes from last episode. Before, it was an amazing shot of Moon Knight's hooded ceremonial warrior attire. Now it is Mr. Knight.
That was pretty cool. The two things I was most excited for with this breakdown was, is he gonna reference Apocalypse Now, and what is that barcode? And I meant to go back to the episode and like scan it myself just to see what that was about, just out of sheer curiosity, because I knew that had to mean something. There's nothing in there for no reason. It was way cooler than I thought, you know, because my anticipation was it was gonna be some goofy website like, oh, you've reached the Moon Knight website, blah, blah, blah. You know, well, I look forward to next week's episode. Like, nothing substantial. I did not think at all that it would be this like full-blown comic book, and then it updated to be another comic book. I'm like, oh, that's super neat. If you're that kind of a hardcore fan, like where you're just gonna go ahead and, even just a curious, you know, fan, at a cursory glance, just like, oh, let's just see what that's about. And to find that, that's a gem, you know, for something that most people won't ever look at, most people won't ever click on. That's just so cool. I really, really dig that. The Apocalypse Now one, maybe that was super obvious to everybody in the room watching, or just people in general. Maybe that's like, I felt special for catching that, just because it was such a, oh man, if you haven't seen Apocalypse Now, that's a really, really intense scene. It's actually kind of hard to watch. You know, once again, Eric Voss did his thing and really broke it down. I think for this one, like, this was less diving into the specific gods and whatnot, and just sort of cluing us into deeper intrinsic meanings to each individual thing that we're seeing on screen. And I actually enjoyed this breakdown more than the previous one. It felt tangible this time, where I'm like, oh, like I'm actually feeling like I'm getting more out of this episode as opposed to encyclopedic information that I'm not gonna be able to hold on to. I really appreciated this breakdown even more. And once again, I did not notice just how many upside down shots or how many instances where you're seeing things upside down. That kind of blew my mind. I meant to say it at the time, but the guy who's like all gold and staying still, he looks just like the dude in the comic. Like, they showed the side-by-side in this breakdown. I'm like, oh my God, like that looks comic accurate. It's crazy. Anyways, I really enjoyed looking at this breakdown with you guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. Please hit that subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications, and vote this up to let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. Thank you again. I am Jabby Kuwait. Peace out.